Hello, my name is Anna Geiger. I am a former teacher now, serving parents and teachers through my blog, themeasuredmom.com, and also through my online course that I've co-created with Becky Spence called Teaching Every Reader. In this video, I want to answer the most common questions that I hear about teaching the alphabet. We're going to go through 5 questions and their answers. The first one is, when should you begin teaching the alphabet? My answer is, it depends. It depends on the age and the development of your learners. Are they ready to learn their letters? Now, I know this is a controversial topic because every time I post something on my Facebook page about teaching the alphabet to 2-year-olds, I get a few people who are really upset. Why would you teach letters to 2-year-olds? You're wasting your time. You're wasting their time. They should be playing, and on and on. Here's the thing. Some 2-year-olds are interested and ready to learn the alphabet. Many are not. I don't think we should make a blanket statement that a certain age is off limits just because we know some children who are not ready. On the other hand, I think that we shouldn't rush to do something just so we can be first, right? So that our child can learn letters before the child next door. So you really need to think about the learners in front of you. If you teach in a classroom or you have more than one child, you certainly have seen how kids learn at a different rate and beginning at a different time. So for example, my oldest, when she was 2.5, was just starting to talk. She didn't even call me mommy until she was 2.5 years old. But she was extremely interested in letters. And even before she was 2, if I named any letter on a piece of paper, she could point to it. I taught them to her in a very informal, relaxed way, and she picked them up extremely quickly. She also learned her sounds in the same way. Some of my boys that came after her did not learn letters as quickly, and we had to do more of a formal learning. By formal, I simply mean a few times a week we sat down and intentionally talked about letters. Then go ahead to my second daughter. When she turned 2 years old, she was extremely interested in doing activities with me, or she called them tivities. Can I do tivities? Because her older siblings had been doing them and she wanted a turn. And so with her, I started my letter of the week with a 2-year-old series. It actually took us at least a month or so before it started clicking, and it wasn't until she was 2.5 that she learned the letters without a whole lot of effort. Now we go to our youngest, who is 2.5 right now, and he is not ready to do formal letter learning. He knows that letters look different than other things, and if I show him a letter, he'll tell me it's the letter A, no matter what letter that it is. He's definitely not asking to do formal activities with me unless they are painting or other messy things. And I'm not worried about it. I just know that everybody learns differently. Realistically, too, it can depend on how much time you've spent with them. My oldest, of course, she was my only child. At the time I was not blogging. I had a lot of extra time. We just talked about letters a lot because it was something to do. Whereas with my youngest now, I am preparing meals for 8 people every day. I am keeping up a business, and I have to spread myself much more thin. So we don't do as much focused learning, and that's okay too. The point is to do it whenever you can, and we'll talk about that in a little bit of how that might look. Now, I do recommend that if you have a child who is 4 years old, that you do start letter learning because I think it's important that they are at least exposed to all the letters before kindergarten. The sooner they know their letters, the easier it will be to start learning to read. This does not mean we force them on our students or our kids, but it means that if they're ready, we teach them. Now, what order should you teach the letters? This depends, again. So if you're starting with kids who are very little and really don't maybe even have a concept yet of what a letter is, you're definitely going to want to start with the letters of their name, because their name is going to be the most meaningful piece of print as soon as they learn to recognize it. So start with those letters. As they get older in preschool, you could also start with the letters of their name, but after that, you might want to start with letters that are easiest to write, because before they start kindergarten, we do want them to at least be able to form the letters in some way. Maybe not with pencil and paper, maybe with a finger and a tray of sand, but regardless, we want them to be able to form them. So I would start with those letters that are easy to form, like capital E, capital F, things like that. Now that brings me to the next question. Should you teach upper or lowercase? If you are teaching very small kids, I definitely recommend starting with uppercase. And that is because those are easier to recognize and to form. If you are teaching kids in kindergarten, then I would definitely say start with lowercase because those are the letters that they're going to need to form words. And I did kind of skip this with the last one, so I'm going to touch on it now. If you are teaching letters to kindergartners, the order should have to do with how what letters they can use to make words as soon as possible, because our whole purpose changes when they're in kindergarten. When they're an early toddler or preschool, it's more about exposing them to all the letters, letting them know what letters are. But when they're in kindergarten, we're interested in getting them reading soon. So we want to start with the letters that can be used to form simple CVC words, consonant, vowel, consonant. So for example, letter A should be one of the first letters that you teach because you can use it to form a lot of simple words. Also, letters that are continuous, and by that I mean like the letter S, or the letter M, As much as possible, put those letters at the beginning that they can sustain because it makes it easier to learn to sound out words. So that's the answer to my first few questions. Let's talk about, should you teach letter names first or letter sounds first? This is a very good question because some people strongly believe you should not teach letter names at the beginning. You just teach the letters by their sound. So you wouldn't say this is an F, you would say this is F. Now, I don't think that it has to be wrong to do that, or you're going to damage students by teaching sounds first and not teaching letter names, but I just don't think it's necessary. One reason that people often propose or promote that particular method is because they say that it's confusing for kids to learn the letter names and the sounds. To that I say, many letter names and sounds are almost the same or very similar. So if they learn F, comes along pretty naturally, or B, B, your mouth is in the same place. But that's not true for every letter, but it is true for many of them. So I have found personally that when kids know their letters, teaching them their sounds after that isn't too far of a jump, if they're developmentally ready. And then I would also say that it's good to support them in their learning the alphabetic principle, that each letter represents a sound. So they can learn that by knowing this is the letter name and this is the sound that it represents. And then finally, knowing letters is useful as a point of reference. So for example, if you're saying, can you bring me that box? It has a word on it that starts with a B, right? You probably wouldn't say it starts with a B. But just having them know letters and using that as a point of reference in their world is extremely useful. So we talked about when to begin teaching. Again, it depends on the age and if they're ready. We talked about what order to teach the letters. Again, depends on their age and what your purpose is. Whether you should teach upper or lowercase first, and then whether you should teach sounds or letter names first. Now I want to talk to you about the method. That's my fifth question. How do you teach letters? Now, there are different opinions here. Many early childhood educators do not believe in letter of the week, and they have some good reasons. Okay, so a traditional letter of the week program is that every week you teach a brand new letter, you focus all your activities around it, you might do some worksheets, you often do the same sort of activities every single week. It's kind of an isolated part of your day. Some concerns that people have with that is that they don't like isolating the letters. They want to teach them in the context of the whole alphabet. They say that many kids cannot keep up with the pace, or for others it's very boring because they learn their letters very quickly. And they may be concerned that the students are missing important elements of an early childhood education program. And then of course in kindergarten, if you teach a letter a week, that's going to be very slow and they're not going to be reading very soon. Here's my answer. I think letter of the week can be very useful and positive if you make the right tweaks. So in preschool, I would say that you could do letter of the week. You might be able to do several letters in a week, depending on the ability of your students. Maybe upper 4-year-olds could do that, right? But probably not 3-year-olds. I think you need to be flexible. So in a classroom where you've got a couple kids who just are not getting it, and you've got kids who know all their letters, maybe you could do some kind of small group work where with those older kids, you're doing reading. And with those kids who really struggle, you take it at a slower pace and you make it very multisensory. And then in the kindergarten room, you're definitely not going to want to do a single letter a week, but you're going to want to do several letters of the week, and you can incorporate some of those multisensory methods to learn those letters. Again, perhaps with small groups for kids who are still really struggling. Now, some methods that I recommend for teaching letters, one thing I found very helpful is sorting. So I have a product of real pictures, photographs that you can print, and letter names, and having kids sort those letters in different fonts or different colors, and then also matching them to the pictures whose names they start with. Those are all good things to do. I also recommend an alphabet tracing book where kids flip the pages in the book and practice forming the letter on top of it with their finger and naming the picture. For kids who really struggle to learn their alphabet in kindergarten, going through that book every day can be extremely helpful. Another thing I would say is to, as I've mentioned already, make it as multisensory as possible. So have them form letters in a tray with their finger, maybe a tray of salt or a tray of sand. I've also found that using a chopstick instead of your finger can be fun and works really well for some kids too. I would recommend keeping the worksheets at a minimum because doing a lot of seat work is probably not going to be the most effective. I would say most of your letter learning should be out of the seats. Physical, maybe standing on a letter of a particular letter, maybe made in painter's tape on your classroom carpet or written on your driveway in chalk. I would say keep your focused letter learning short, especially in a classroom of preschoolers at all different levels. So if you're going to do focused letter learning, I think that's great, but I would not make it more than 15 minutes a day. And again, limit worksheets as much as possible and make the activities different from week to week. Don't buy a cookie cutter curriculum that has the exact same printables every single week in the exact same activities. That's going to bore you and it's going to bore your students. So mix it up as much as you can. Now, if you're looking for ideas for teaching the alphabet and mixing it up and having a flexible approach and making it interesting, I recommend my Letter of the Week curriculum. I designed it for kids in preschool. So it's roughly for kids age 2.5, maybe up to age 5. It is flexible in that you are encouraged to pick and choose which activities you want to do. It also includes over 300 pages of printables. Many of them are little books and not necessarily pencil and paper worksheets, but more interactive. Another thing I have to offer you is my guidebook. If you are interested in learning more about teaching the alphabet, but you don't want a full curriculum, you can purchase my short 20-page guidebook, which gives a lot more information about the things we've talked about here and some bonus material such as an assessment form and some book lists for books that I recommend reading for each letter, as well as a few other goodies like a list of sensory play ideas or sensory ways to learn the alphabet, and also a list of art, open-ended art that you can do that would be appropriate to each letter of the alphabet. So I'm going to leave links to those 2 resources, also my letter picture cards at the end of this video, and feel free to check them out. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to sharing more educational videos with you soon.